Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. The sound shattered the stillness like dropped glass. A laugh, impossibly high and sharp, slicing through the sepulchral quiet of the Meridian Galleria at 11:47 p.m. I stalled, boot hovering over cracked linoleum, my torch beam frozen on the floor's desolate mosaic. That sound had no business here, not in this mausoleum of commerce. Particularly not in the West Wing, derelict and slated for the wrecking ball inside a month. My name is Elias Thorne. For 8 years, the nocturnal pulse of the Galleria has been my beat, specifically the revitalized East Wing, where the multiplex and eateries still hummed with life. Tonight, however, taskmasters decreed a final sweep of the condemned West Wing ahead of tomorrow's demolition cruise. 3 years shuttered. Every storefront gaped, steel grills drawn like eyelids over dead eyes, display windows obscured by thick industrial plastic. The air hung heavy, tasting of ossified dust and faint decay. My own steps became a hollow percussion against walls stripped bare of bygone advertisements. Only the emergency lamps bled a weak, arterial crimson onto the scene. There it was again. Feminine laughter spilling from within chic boutique, a defunct clothier perhaps 30 feet down the corridor. A glacial prickle traced my scalp. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. The sound was wrong, too vibrant, too solid for this architectural corpse. I've handled intruders, kids chasing viral fame, vagrants seeking refuge. But the West Wing? Sealed tighter than a drum for months. Every access point chained, padlocked. I'd verified them myself when my shift began. My flashlight's eye swept the boutique's front. The security gate remained lowered, a formidable lattice of heavy steel. The display windows, swaddled in black plastic, were taped fast at every seam. No breach, no ingress possible. Another peal of laughter, nearer this time. My mouth turned to sand. A film of sweat bloomed on my brow despite the chill. One step, then another, the rubber soles of my boots whispering obscenities against the floor. Security! My voice, surprisingly steady, echoed. This area is off limits. Show yourself, hands where I can see them. The laughter choked off. Silence rushed back in, absolute, amplifying the frantic thrumming within my own chest. I drifted closer, scrutinizing the storefront for any flaw. Gate solid, plastic sheath undisturbed. Yet, approaching, the darkness behind the plastic seemed deeper, more profound than mere shadow. A rasping noise emanated from inside, the drag of something cumbersome across the floor, followed by footfalls, measured, deliberate, advancing toward the gate. My hand instinctively sought the radio clipped to my belt, but a strange reluctance stayed me. Report what? Giggles in a hermetically sealed shop? The ensuing break room mockery was almost as chilling. The footsteps halted directly opposite me, on the other side of the steel barrier. I angled my torch higher, attempting to pierce the narrow gaps between the links. Final warning, I managed. Identify yourself. A soft thump against the metal startled me backward, then another and another, like deliberate finger taps, one by one against the cold steel. The laughter resumed, transformed, no longer sharp, but low, viscous, fundamentally wrong. Retreating, I fumbled the radio free. Static spat as I depressed the transmit button. Dispatch, Thorn here, West Wing. Investigating a possible what? The tapping traversed the gate, left to right. Then, a sound like fingernails scoring metal, a shiver tracing its path down my spine. "Thorn, say again," the radio crackled, tinny. "Signal unstable." Behind the gate, the black plastic membrane began to distend, subtly at first, like breath pressing against it. "Requesting immediate assistance, West Wing," I barked into the radio. "Now." More static flared, then silence, dead air. The bulge swelled, the plastic stretching. The tapping ceased, replaced by a wet, slithering friction. My flashlight beam jittered, betraying the tremor in my hand. Elias. The name, a mere exhalation, yet perfectly clear. My name breathed from beyond the gate. My knees buckled. How? My name tag, a flimsy shield of rationality offered by some corner of my brain, provided zero comfort as I watched the plastic warp further, taking on an unholy contour, a face pressing through from the other side. Vague impressions formed in the strained material. Suggestions of orbital hollows, a nasal ridge, a mouth stretched impossibly wide in a ghastly grin. The black fabric thinned under the pressure, becoming disturbingly translucent. I bolted. My boots hammered the tiles, a desperate rhythm echoing my flight back through the crimson-lit corridor. The laughter pursued, cascading off the walls, seemingly omnipresent. Emergency exits pulsed like warning beacons. Rounding a planter, I collided hard with a concrete bench, agony lancing through my hip. The flashlight spun from my grasp, its beam cartwheeling wildly before extinguishing. Swearing, I scrambled upright. The laughter was closer now, accompanied by footsteps, running, impossibly swift, closing in behind me. The exit door loomed at the corridor's end, its sign a fiery promise in the gloom. 50 feet, achievable. Something frigid grazed the nape of my neck, like questing fingers, but wrong, elongated, unnaturally cold. I surged forward, running harder than I knew possible. The exit sign swelled. 30 feet, 20, 10. I slammed the crash bar with both palms, bursting into the humid embrace of the night. I didn't cease running until I reached the East Wing security hub, slamming the door, locking it, collapsing into the worn office chair. The overnight supervisor discovered me there 20 minutes later, still trembling. I fed him a story, attempted break-in, chased them off. He accepted it without scrutiny, logged it, confined me to the office for the shift's remainder. The following morning, I tendered my resignation. Within a week, I secured new employment. Daytime security at a downtown bank. Predictable hours, better compensation, blessedly free of abandoned wings. The demolition commenced as planned. Occasionally, driving past during daylight hours, I observed the West Wing's methodical dismemberment. But I never returned after dusk. never courted the possibility that the laughter lingered in those skeletal halls, never desired confirmation of what had truly waited behind that steel gate. Yet, sometimes, adrift in the solitary dark, I hear it, that piercing, serrated laugh. And I wrestle with the question, had I lingered mere seconds more, what visage would have fully emerged through that straining plastic? Would I have understood the source of its knowledge, how it knew my name? Sleep offers little refuge on those nights. I haven't worked a night shift since. One detail, however, gnaws deeper than the laughter, the distorted face, the wetly whispered name. When I returned that final morning to submit my notice, I took one last, sunlit look at the West Wing entrance. Everything appeared mundane. The gate secure, the plastic sheeting unmarred. But etched onto the steel links, I saw it, and my blood turned to ice water. 5 distinct gouges, spaced like skeletal fingers, where something had scraped across the metal. The steel itself was corroded, eaten away as if by potent acid. And beside these marks, articulated in the same caustic script, "Goodbye, Alias." I walked away from that mall without a backward glance. But now, passing darkened storefronts late at night, my pace quickens instinctively, and I never, ever pause if I hear laughter emanating from behind locked doors. They raised the West Wing last year, erecting a tiered parking structure on its footprint. I refuse to park there, avoid driving past after sunset. Because the stories persist. Late at night, faint laughter drifts from the concrete levels. High, sharp laughter that cuts the darkness like a shard of ice. And sometimes, they claim, if you strain your ears, you can hear it murmuring names. Names it remembers. Names it anticipates. I changed jobs again last month. Relocated to another city, seeking anonymity, a clean slate. But I double-checked the deadbolts before retiring, sleep bathed in artificial light, and jolt awake, drenched in cold sweat when laughter infiltrates my dreams. Because I carry a certainty now, acquired that night, a truth that irrevocably alters one's perception of the world. Not all voids are vacant. Not all barriers hold, and sometimes the things that chuckle in the shadows know your name. They know your name and they possess an unnerving patience. So very patient. I chronicle this now as a testament, a warning. If your work, your life, places you alone in desolate spaces after dark, heed this. Should you hear laughter where none should exist, do not seek its source. Do not challenge it. Do not illuminate the darkness it occupies. Flee. Run without reservation, and resist the urge to look back. Because should you glimpse your pursuer, it achieves a permanence. It never ceases following. I feel it sometimes, even now. That phantom chill on my neck, the sibilant whisper of my name in that viscid, wrong voice, the cadence of footfalls trailing mine on lonely nocturnal streets, drawing nearer, always drawing nearer. Therapists diagnose paranoia, postulate a mental fracture triggered by stress and isolation that night, assure me my senses played tricks. But they didn't witness the acid-etched farewell on that gate, didn't hear their own name invoked by the darkness. I'm moving again next week. Another town, another attempt at erasure. Futile, I suspect, because sometimes, late, when the house settles into profound quietude and shadow, I hear it. That familiar, high-pitched laugh drifting up the stairwell. Those heavy, deliberate footsteps, ascending. It's time to run again. But the weariness is immense. So very tired of running. The preceding text was recovered from a laptop found in an otherwise empty apartment in Portland, Oregon. The tenant, identified as Elias Thorne, formerly employed as a security guard at the Meridian Galleria, has been missing for 3 months. His current location remains unknown. Beneath my worn treads, the forest floor fractured, a brittle mosaic of autumn decay. 6 solitary hours I'd traversed this vein of earth snaking deep within the Cascades, the sun bleeding long, skeletal shadows across the path. Pines pressed close, a dense, silent congregation. No signal bars, no human echo but my own breath. Just the weight of my pack and the immensity of the wild. Then a scent threaded through the pine air, not the acrid bite of wildfire, but the intimate sweetness of cedar smoke, a hearth misplaced. The trail hooked sharply. Beyond the trunks, a small wound in the woods, a clearing, a hastily erected shelter, vacant. Yet the fire pit held a dying heart, embers pulsing beneath a shroud of ash. A profound disquiet settled over me. Gear vomited from the tent's maw, a sleeping bag half-berthed, a stove overturned, foil wrappers ripped asunder, rations strewn like offerings rejected. Evidence of abrupt, panicked departure. "Anyone here?" The sound felt profane against the stillness. Silence answered. Hesitantly, I breached the clearing's edge. The chaos sharpened. Frantic boot impressions churning the loam, a canteen disgorging its contents into a dark stain. The tent's fabric shivered in a phantom breeze. Within, a rucksack gutted, garments flung about, and a torch clinging to life, its beam a frail ghost in the waning daylight. A cold prickle traced my spine despite the mountain air's chill. My gaze swept the encircling woods, searching the dense tapestry of shadow. Nothing stirred, until my eye snagged on a shard of bark beside the fire's remains. Scrawled in crude charcoal, a stark command. "Stay quiet, it's still nearby." My fingers trembled as I replaced the bark, a ritual gesture against encroaching dread. Behind me, snap, a twig yielded. I pivoted. The woods remained impassive, deep-shadowed sentinels. Yet now, every darkness held potential menace. Another sound, nearer this time, the distinct compression of leaf litter under significant weight. Retreating towards the path, the rasp of my own breath felt like a betrayal. Control it. Silence. A sudden avian explosion from the canopy startled a gasp from me, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Then, more intrusions. A furtive rustling, the measured thump, thump of footfalls. Not deer, not bear. Too rhythmic, too heavy. Reaching the trail's edge, raw instinct screamed, "Flee." But flight meant noise meant discovery. The unseen presence paced the clearing's perimeter, a ghost in the periphery drawn nearer. 20 yards off, a bough dipped unnaturally. 15. I began a slow, backward shuffle down the trail, vision pinned to the disturbed foliage. A flicker of motion between trunks, dark, swift, impossibly tall. My boot dislodged scree. Stones chattered down the slope, amplified in the stillness. All movement ceased. The forest held its breath. No birdsong, no wind sigh, absolute vacuum. I suspended my own breathing, counting the frantic beats against my ribs. 1, 2, 3. From the trees erupted a guttural sound, low and resonant, vibrating through the very soil, utterly alien. Prudence shattered. Stealth evaporated. Raw, primal imperative seized control. Run. I bolted. Branches lashed my face, roots clawed at my ankles, but terror propelled me. Parallel to the trail, something immense bulldozed through the undergrowth impossibly fast. The growl escalated to a full-throated roar. A backward glance. Fatal error. My foot snagged. I met the earth with bruising force. Pain flared in palms and knees. The crashing sound vectored directly towards me. Scrabbling upright, my hand closed on a fallen branch. Pitiful defense, yet something. Between the trees, fleeting glimpses, towering, tenebrous, its locomotion nightmarishly fluid. The wood quivered in my grip. My whole frame shuddered. Metallic tang bloomed on my tongue. It erupted from the tree line. I hurled the stick, a futile gesture. It glanced off the entity's mass without effect. Again, I fled, legs screaming, lungs burning, mind shrieking for velocity. The roar slammed against my back. Hot breath ghosted my neck. Claws raked the air where I'd been. The trail plunged. I tumbled more than ran, sharp stones tearing at my hands. Ahead, a fallen giant blocked the way. No detour. I vaulted, landed brutally, rolled, regained my feet, still running. Behind me, a sickening crunch as the pursuer impacted the log, splintering ancient wood. The sound reverberated through the twilight woods. Ahead, a sheer rock face loomed, offering a dark maw, a cave, sanctuary, however fleeting. I surged towards it. The fissure was tight. I turned, scraped through sideways, stone tearing flesh, the pain irrelevant. Inside, the blackness was absolute, swallowing sound and sight. I flattened myself against the cold stone, struggling to muffle my ragged breaths. A colossal silhouette eclipsed the entrance. It tested the air, claws grating on rock. Too large for the aperture. A roar of thwarted fury detonated within the confines, battering my senses. Deeper I crept, inch by agonizing inch, away from the sentinel shape. My foot met void. I flailed, arresting a fall into unseen depths. The exit remained sealed. Groping along the wall, my fingers found purchase on a narrow shelf. I hoisted myself up, pressing into the rock. Time dissolved in the Stygian dark. Minutes, hours. The guardian at the entrance remained, a statue of patient malice. My limbs quaked from sustained tension. Cold sweat drenched me despite the subterranean chill. Trapped, think, plan. My searching hand brushed against cool, smooth metal. A torch. I thumbed it on. The beam, feeble as the one in the ravaged tent, illuminated the ledge extending along the wall, leading towards a secondary passage, a smaller tunnel snaking into the earth's bowels. Glancing back, the watcher remained. Stay or gamble on the unknown passage. Then, something on the cave floor below snagged the edge of the light. Scratches in the stone, the same desperate hand as the bark warning, "Don't use light. It draws them." Them? Plural. I extinguished the beam instantly. From the tunnel now, not the entrance, came new sounds. A dry scraping, chitinous clicks steadily approaching. The entity at the mouth growled low. Answering, guttural replies echoed from the deeper dark. I shrank against the wall, refuge becoming tomb. The clicking reached my ledge. Fetid breath washed over me, from multiple sources. I squeezed my eyes shut against the inevitable dark. Talons found their mark. 3 days have bled into the sterile white of this hospital room where I commit these words to paper. The physicians nod politely at my fragmented narrative, their focus narrowed to the geography of my wounds, the lacerations, the fractures, the festering bites. How did I escape? I offer them amnesia, a convenient blankness. It is a falsehood. I recall every horrific detail, the gnashing teeth, the multitude of predatory eyes, the geometries of their forms defy natural law. I remember the sudden, vicious squabble that erupted over their prey, me, a territorial dispute that cracked open an opportunity. I crawled from that resonant darkness while their shrieks made the mountain tremble, stumbled through moonless woods, fell, rose, ran until tarmac appeared beneath my feet, until headlights pinned me, until salvation arrived in a stranger's car. Authorities combed the site. They found the violated camp, the desperate warnings etched on bark and stone, my own blood painting the cave floor. They found no culprits. Now, news feeds carry the familiar refrain. Another hiker vanished in the Cascades. Search teams deploy, their dogs balking, whining. Helicopters scan in different canopies. A scream builds in my throat to warn them, to articulate the monstrous truth lurking in those wilds. But credibility is a fragile thing, easily shattered by horrors too large for belief. So I confine it here, this testament. Believe it, dismiss it, the choice is yours. But heed this. Should you wander those trails alone, should you stumble upon a camp abruptly emptied, should a charcoal plea meet your eye, should the woods behind you stir with unnatural weight, understand that flight, concealment, resistance are futile gestures. It is already upon you. They are legion, and their hunger is eternal. Discharge is slated for next week. They call me fortunate, a survivor. Will I hike again? They inquire. Never, I assure them. Another untruth. I am returning to those peaks, to that subterranean darkness, not for recreation, not for remembrance, for retribution. Their methods, their vulnerabilities, the patterns of their alien minds, these are now etched into my own. I will not go solitary this time, nor ill-equipped. They fancy themselves the apex predators, an error I intend to correct. Law enforcement is impotent, the rangers blind. The burden falls to me. Someone must draw the line. Someone must stem the tide, regardless of the price. The calendar marks a waxen moon, full in a fortnight. Ideal conditions for the hunt. This purgatory of dust and forgotten things wasn't my choice. Months of Clara's pointed suggestions escalate into last week's ultimatum. The attic, Elias, or I walk, had cornered me here, amidst the sarcophagi of cardboard and the ghosts of 30 years. Each breath was a gritty insult. Cobwebs, fragile shrouds clung like second skin. Above, a naked bulb hemorrhaged harsh light, carving lunatic shadows across the slanted rafters. My spine screamed from hours spent hunched like a supplicant. 3 hours entombed, sifting remnants, brittle magazines dissolving into confetti, shattered baubles of Christmases past, woolens ravaged by generations of moths, most consigned to the black plastic gullets of trash bags. Few relics earned a reprieve. Then, tucked in the deepest eaves, something apart from the decay. A chest, small but solid, hewn from some dark, close-grained wood, bound with tarnished brass hinges. No memory surfaced of placing it here, perhaps something Clara owned before our lives entwined. My touch disturbed its thick mantle of dust, leaving pale handprints. The latch yielded with a soft, oiled click. Within, swaddled in brittle, tea-stained tissue, rested a music box. Compact, perhaps 4 inches square, its carved wood darkened by time, the finish rubbed away at the corners to reveal the paler grain beneath. A sudden constriction in my chest, a dryness seasoned my throat. Recognition, cold and sharp, Nana Ilara's gift bestowed upon my 8-year-old self. Vanished during the 92 upheaval, the source of my old man's week-long silent fury, a legacy piece he'd thundered, passed through hands long turned to dust. My own hands trembled now as I inverted it. The brass winding key, small and cruciform, protruded from the base, its metal oxidized nearly black. A fool's errand to wind it. The delicate clockwork surely seized with rust and time, yet the impulse was undeniable. The key resisted, then turned with a faint, grinding protest. 1 rotation, 2, 3 full turns. The lid sprang open. Where a delicate ballerina once pirouetted, only a bare brass post remained, stark and lonely. A hesitant trickle of notes, fractured and slow, leaked into the stagnant air. Not the simple, sweet strains of Greensleeves etched in memory. This was aberrant. A limping, discordant sequence that scraped against the silence, notes dragging, catching like snagged thread. An unnatural chill wicketed the warmth from the cramped space. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. The bare bulb overhead flickered, pulsed. The melody, however, found its rhythm, gathering a disturbing momentum. The notes sharpened, coalesced into a pattern that resonated with a dreadful, submerged familiarity. Something archaic, freighted with menace. It tugged at the edges of my consciousness, dredging up phantom recollections. Cyclopean stones silhouetted against starless voids, robed figures swaying, their chants woven from languages dead before the Tiber flowed. My fingers spasmed, straining towards the lid, but the command dissolved somewhere between brain and muscle. The wood remained open, spilling its sonic poison. Then, floorboards groaned on the attic stairs. Clara's voice, muffled. "Elias? Progress report?" Need screamed within me. Warn her, get away. But my throat was locked stone. The trapdoor swung upwards, framing Clara's face, concern etched around her eyes. "Found anything interesting? I brought you some." Her words died. Her gaze locked onto my face, then dropped to the music box cradled in my hands. Her eyes widened, pupils dilating. Where did you get that?" Her voice was a thread of sound, vibrating with disbelief, with dawn and terror. "That isn't. It can't be." The melody surged, reaching a perverse climax, notes twisting into frequencies that should be impossible for such a simple mechanism. Sharp intrusions boring into my skull like slivers of ice. Clara recoiled. "No, Elias, no, put it down. Put it down now." Still, I was stone, a statue carved from fear. The music coiled around my thoughts, a tightening wire of cold sound. She lunged, her hand flashing out, aiming to strike the box from my grasp. Her fingertips grazed the age-darkened wood. Silence absolute, utter. It swallowed the music, the creak of the house, the distant city hum. The light bulb died. In the sudden, suffocating darkness, something shifted. A soft, wet, chitinous scrape. The air grew thick with the smell of damp earth, of deep decay. Clara's flashlight beam slashed the dark, a frantic blade of light finding the music box. The ballerina's vacant pedestal writhed. It elongated, segmented. A viscous obsidian fluid wept from the mechanism, sizzling where it struck my skin, a fierce, consuming cold that burned deep. I couldn't release my grip. The thing, extruding itself from the diminutive box, bore no resemblance to any dancer. Impossibly long, multi-jointed limbs unfolded, defying the confines of their origin. How much was there? How could it continue to emerge, pouring itself into reality? Clara screamed, a raw, tearing sound. The flashlight beam danced crazily, illuminating nightmare glimpses, facets that refracted light wrongly, angles that defied Euclidean space, a presence that felt physically painful to perceive. Beneath my skin, where the dark fluid touched, I felt a horrifying crawl, a burrowing sensation spreading up my arms. Clara scrambled backward, desperate, tripping over a forgotten box. She fell hard. The flashlight spun away, its beam cartwheeling into oblivion. The entity, now fully manifest, a towering silhouette of impossible geometry that crowded the low-ceilinged attic, turned its alien attention towards her pinned form against the far wall. A primal surge against the invisible bonds. Muscles screamed, vision flared red. Move. The paralysis fractured. Clara, ladder, now. My voice ripped raw from my throat. She didn't need telling twice, rolling, scrabbling, finding the opening and tumbling down the ladder. Her frantic footsteps hammered away downstairs. The impossible presence pivoted its alien attention towards me, its form shifting, flowing in ways that threatened sanity. One frantic thought surfaced. With a final, desperate heave, I slammed the dark wood lid shut. A shriek tore through the attic, less sound than physical force, making my teeth ache and blood trickle warm from my ears. The entity seemed to implode, collapsing back into the confines of the box like liquid down a drain, folding, compressing. The lid clicked firmly shut. The key ceased its slow unwinding. Darkness, shaking. Blood dripped from my nose. My hands throbbed, blistered and raw where the fluid had touched. Clara's voice floated up, thin with fear. "Elias? Elias? Are you all right?" "Stay down," I croaked, the words tearing at my throat. "Don't come back up. It has to be destroyed before it opens again." The derelict furnace, a hulking iron relic in the corner. Its rusted maw gaped. Trembling fingers fumbled with the latch. Inside, cobwebs and the scent of cold ash. The box went in. The heavy door clanged shut. Matches scraped, flared, died. The third caught, feeding brittle paper, splintered wood into the grate. Heat bloomed unnaturally fast, the iron beginning to groan. Then the screaming began, inside, the iron belly. Not the entity's alien shriek, but worse, a child's terror, achingly familiar. My own, decades lost. "Don't. I'll be good. Please." Nana Ilara's voice joined, then my old man's, then Clara's, a chorus of the damned, amplified by the resonating metal. The furnace shuddered violently, rocking on its base. The door strained, buckled outwards against the latch. Black, greasy smoke poured from every joint, thick with the stench of rendered fat and something anciently foul. The voices climbed to an unbearable, flensing pitch. The furnace itself began to glow, first cherry red, then orange, then a blinding white, and then abrupt silence. The glow subsided, leaving pulsing after images burned onto my retinas. An hour crawled by before I dared the latch. Ash, gray and feathery and slagged, heat-tortured metal. Nothing else remained. But the burning in my hands persisted. Later, under the trembling beam of a fresh flashlight, I saw them. Beneath the blistered skin, fine, filament-like lines networked, dark veins creeping upwards from my palms. Clara refuses to set foot on attic stairs again. We sealed the trap door, a silent pact to never speak of it, deferring the rest of the cleaning to a future that feels increasingly unreal. But my hands, they change. The dark lines spread, branching beneath the skin day by day. And the silence is a lie. At the edge of hearing, sometimes closer, a whisper of that dissonant tune persists. It resonates within me now, a seed of wrongness taking root, growing. Sometimes I see Clara watching my hands, her eyes wide with the fear she cannot voice. She sees the subtle shifts, the way my fingers flex at unnatural angles, the way shadows pool around me, not quite right. Soon, the music will swell, the transformation will ripen. I hear it now, clearer, louder, my fingers twitch, keeping time to an interior rhythm. It won't be long. This text was recovered from Elias Vance's personal computer. He and his wife, Clara Vance, vanished approximately 3 weeks prior. Their home's attic suffered extensive damage from a fire investigators deemed of indeterminate origin. Peculiarly, despite neighbor testimony suggesting decades of accumulation, the attic was found entirely empty, save for intricate patterns scorched onto the floorboards, curved glyphs and notations resembling music. Experts remain baffled by their style and era. Several individuals who attempted transcription have subsequently disappeared without a trace. The instant her silhouette materialized through the torrential downpour, thumb extended, a fragile beacon of desperation against the churning black, a wiser self screamed to accelerate. Yet some impulse, call it misplaced compassion, morbid intrigue, or sheer unadulterated folly, commanded my foot to the brake. How could I fathom that this single deviation, this minor act of roadside charity, would unravel into a night stitched from pure terror, a harrowing ordeal that would forever haunt not only the memory of that decision, but the very essence of my survival. It was, undeniably, a dark and tempestuous night. Yes, the very definition of a trope, but reality offered no substitute. Exhaustion clung to me after a prolonged shift tending to the broken bodies at the city hospital. My wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge, their frantic rhythm a metronome against the glass, revealing only fleeting glimpses of the sodden, empty highway unfurling before me like a ribbon of liquid obsidian. Then she appeared. A wraith conjured by the storm, huddled roadside, fabric plastered to a slight form, utterly consumed by the rain. As the cone of my headlight swept over her, she pivoted, her face stark beneath the downpour, a canvas painted with fragile hope warring against stark despair. The car slowed, inertia battling the insistent shriek of self-preservation in my skull. But the image of leaving her adrift in that aqueous wilderness proved unbearable. I leaned across the void of the passenger seat, pushing the door outward against the wind. Destination? my voice strained to carry over the percussive roar of rain on metal. She scrambled inside, a swift, fluid motion ending as she sank into the seat, offering a smile that barely disturbed the tension in her features. "Bless you," she breathed, her voice thin, almost lost. "Just aiming for the next town over. My car. It gave up the ghost a few miles back." A curt nod was my reply as I eased the vehicle back onto the glistening tarmac. "Elias," I offered, attempting a veneer of normalcy over the disquiet coiling low in my gut. "Lyra," she murmured, twisting strands of her long, dark hair, releasing trapped rivulets of water onto the floor mat. Silence descended, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the relentless drumming above and the hypnotic sweep-swish of the wipers. Peripheral glances became my preoccupation. An indefinable otherness radiated from her, a subtle dissonance I couldn't pinpoint. Bit late to be stranded so far from civilization, I ventured, probing the quiet. A flicker of tension tightened her shoulders before dissolving. "Ah, well, visiting an acquaintance. Time. It slipped away." I offered another non-committal nod, though the explanation felt thin, ill-fitting. "Paranoia," I chided myself, trying to dismiss the prickling unease, forcing my attention back to the treacherous road. Yet, as the miles dissolved behind us, Lyra's agitation became palpable. Her gaze flickered incessantly towards the side mirror, a frantic shuttle between the rain-lashed darkness pursuing us and the void ahead. "Everything all right back there?" I asked, the knot of apprehension in my stomach tightening. "Fine," she clipped out, the speed of her denial betraying her. "Just the lateness, you know, makes one edgy." Before I could press, twin stars ignited in my rearview mirror. Headlights, approaching with alarming velocity, far too aggressive for the slick conditions. The vehicle swelled rapidly in the reflection, a hulking, dark SUV. Lyra witnessed its arrival simultaneously. She seemed to shrink into the upholstery, her breaths growing rapid, shallow. "Could you, perhaps accelerate?" she pleaded, her voice a fragile tremor. Alarm bells now clanged violently in my mind. I depressed the accelerator, the engine whining in protest. "Lyra, what is this? Who is that?" She shook her head, a frantic, negative motion. "Please, Elias, just drive. They can't take me back." The SUV loomed directly behind, its high beams scorching through my rear window, bleaching the interior, momentarily blinding me to the road ahead. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drummer fueled by adrenaline. What abyss had I stumbled into? Abruptly, a brutal impact slammed into my rear bumper. The car lurched violently. I wrestled the wheel, fighting to maintain control on the treacherous surface. Lyra emitted a choked scream, raw terror stark in her eyes. "Hang on," I shouted, wrenching the wheel, narrowly avoiding a second collision. The SUV clung to us, a relentless predator, matching every desperate maneuver, every surge of speed. "Who are they?" I demanded, fear curdling with rising anger. "What is their objective?" Tears streamed down Lyra's face now, words tumbling out between ragged sobs. "They're not good people. I got away. They want me. Please, please, don't let them have me. My thoughts fractured. This woman, this fugitive, what inferno had she escaped? And more critically, what hell had I just steered myself into? Ahead, a sliver of an escape route, a narrow track vanishing into the dense woods. Impulse took over. I spun the wheel hard, sending us fishtailing wildly down the unlit path. The SUV plunged in after us, but the constricted passage offered a slight reprieve. My smaller sedan navigated the sharp curves with marginally more agility. We hurtled deeper into the arboreal tunnel, trees flashing past as indistinct blurs against the oppressive dark. The pursuing headlights fell back slightly, though their ominous glow still bounced and flickered through the foliage behind us. "There's supposed to be a town," Lyra said, her voice gaining a semblance of steadiness. "Just ahead. If we reach it, we might be safe." A grim nod was my only response, every fiber of concentration dedicated to mastering the slick, unseen track. Rain continued its assault, relentless sheets that threatened hydroplaning with every puddle, yet somehow, miraculously, I kept us tethered to the earth. After an eternity compressed into frantic minutes, pinpricks of light emerged through the trees. The town. A wave of profound relief washed through me as the first ramshackle structures materialized from the gloom. But the relief evaporated as quickly as it had formed. Entering the town proper, an unnerving wrongness permeated the air. Utter desertion. Not a soul stirred on the streets, though the hour wasn't impossibly late. Worse, the buildings themselves seemed diseased. Windows gaped like empty sockets, many crudely boarded. Others emanated an aura of long abandonment. "What is this place?" I murmured, slowing the car, crawling through the spectral silence. Lyra's head swiveled, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "No," she whispered, a frantic denial. "No, this isn't it. This isn't the town. We took a wrong turn somewhere." The fine hairs on my nape prickled. "Lyra," I began, my voice low and deliberate, "what is actually happening here?" Her reply was swallowed by the sudden roar of the SUV erupting into the deserted main street behind us. In the mirror's stark illumination, two figures spilled out, dark shapes brandishing the unmistakable silhouettes of firearms. "Drive!" Lyra shrieked. "Elias, go!" Instinctively, my foot slammed the accelerator. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died with a terminal sigh. Empty. The tank was dry. "Run!" The word tore from my throat as I shoved my door open. We erupted from the car, boots pounding on the wet, empty pavement. We fled through the skeletal remains of the town, pursued by the heavy tread of footsteps and guttural shouts echoing ominously in the enclosed space. Lyra took the lead, navigating the desolate streets with a perplexing certainty that contradicted her earlier confusion. Rounding a corner, we confronted the looming facade of an ancient, decaying church. Without pause, she bolted towards it, wrenching at the massive, groaning wooden door. I plunged in behind her, adding my weight to slam it shut against the night. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of dust and decay, decades of neglect coating every surface in a fine gray shroud. Lyra moved with newfound, startling purpose towards the altar. She knelt, fingers scrabbling at the floor until a section of wood loosened and came away. "What are you doing?" I hissed, my gaze fixed fearfully on the door we'd just secured. "Retrieving my purpose," she replied cryptically, her hand disappearing into the cavity beneath the floor. When she rose, she held a small, intricately carved box, and nestled beside it in her grip, the cold, metallic weight of a pistol. I recoiled, stumbling backward, my mind struggling to bridge the chasm between the damsel in distress and the armed figure before me. "Lyra, what?" She turned fully towards me, and the transformation was complete. Her eyes, previously wide with fear or desperation, were now glacial shards, hard and calculating. "My apologies, Elias. You strike me as decent. But this," she gestured with the box, "cannot fall into their hands, and loose ends, they're inconvenient." Outside, the heavy thud of boots on the church steps grew louder. Lyra raised the gun, the muzzle unwavering, pointed squarely at my chest. In that suspended moment, the world decelerated, every detail sharpened with unnatural clarity, the resolute line of Lyra's jaw, the dull sheen of the firearm in the faint, dusty light filtering through a high window, the ornate box clutched fiercely in her other hand. The groan of the ancient floorboards underfoot announced the arrival of our pursuers, their harsh breathing echoing in the vaulted emptiness. Then pandemonium detonated. The main doors burst inward, framing the two men, weapons raised. Lyra spun, the pistol erupting in her hand with deafening cracks. I hurled myself behind the relative sanctuary of a solid oak pew as projectiles screamed through the air. Wood splintered explosively, stained glass imploded, showering the space in crystalline rain. The air thickened with plaster dust and the acrid tang of gunpowder. Scrabbling low, propelled by a sheer animal terror, I crawled blindly towards the rear of the cavernous space, desperate for an alternative exit. Behind a tattered, moldering tapestry, my searching fingers found the edge of a small, concealed door. I wrenched it open, tumbling into a narrow, spiraling stairwell ascending into darkness, the path to the bell tower. I climbed, lungs burning, the cacophony of the firefight below gradually receding. Reaching the summit, a cramped chamber open to the elements through arched windows, I peered out. Below lay the spectral town, and beyond it, faint but distinct, a constellation of warm lights, civilization, real and attainable. The gunfire ceased abruptly, replaced by an unnerving silence. Then footsteps echoed on the stone stairs below. I flattened myself against the cold, damp wall, holding my breath, every nerve screaming. Lyra emerged into the belfry, streaks of blood painting a grim tableau across her face, the ornate box still clutched possessively. Her eyes darted wildly around the small space before landing on me. For a protracted moment, silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken questions. A flicker, infinitesimally small, crossed her features. Was it remorse, or merely the flat finality of acceptance? "Truly, Elias," she whispered, the sound barely disturbing the air, "I am sorry." Then she pivoted and descended back into the shadows below. I remained frozen until the last echo of her footfalls faded. Cautiously, heart still hammering a frantic rhythm, I navigated my way down the treacherous stairs and slipped out of the violated sanctuary. The ghost town lay utterly still, devoid of Lyra, her pursuers, or any sign of the preceding violence. Guided by the distant promise of light, I began to walk. It was a journey measured not in miles but in hours of weary trudging through lingering rain and profound shock. Eventually, the spectral gave way to the substantial, a genuine town humming with the quiet pulse of ordinary life. I found the police, recounted the night's impossible events, the words sounding hollow and fantastical even as they left my lips. Their polite skepticism was a palpable thing. Lyra vanished from my life as abruptly as she had entered it. The contents of the box, her true identity, the nature of her pursuers, these remain questions etched into the fabric of that night, unanswered riddles. But sometimes, when the sky weeps and darkness reigns, if a solitary figure emerges from the gloom at the roadside, thumb outstretched against the storm, the memory surfaces, cold and sharp, and I keep driving. Iron groaned beneath my soles. That's when the first thread of sound reached us, Jax and me, spooling up from the abyssal dark below. We froze in unison upon the corroded ladder, twin beams from our headlamps slicing cones through 3 decades of settled dust. It came again, that murmur, gaining texture. Syllables I couldn't parse, yet undeniably vocal, undeniably emanating from within this skeletal grain silo we'd breached on the town's forgotten fringe. "You catching that?" Jax's voice, a strained whisper beneath me. A nod was my only reply, lost to the gloom separating us. My knuckles whitened against the frigid metal rungs. We were veterans of the derelict, Jax and I, connoisseurs of collapsed factories, hollowed houses, mine shafts sighing their last breaths, but this edifice felt other. The air itself possessed a palpable weight, a suffocating presence, as if the darkness resented our intrusion of light. The whispers swelled anew, a braiding of multiple voices, cresting and receding like a phantom tide. They seemed to originate higher up, perhaps near the apex machinery, the silo's dormant heart. "Up there, got to be," Jax declared, that familiar feverish spark igniting his tone. The same resonance I remembered from childhood raids on the defunct paper mill, from teenage descents into abandoned metro tunnels. "What do you say, Leo? Feel like meeting the locals?" My mouth felt like sandpaper. "Could just be drifters," I offered, the words lacking conviction. "Or kids playing ghost." But the sound bore no resemblance to human mischief. It possessed an unsettling distortion, filtered as if through water, or maybe static crackling across a dead channel. Only one way to know for sure. Jax resumed his ascent, the rhythmic clang of his pack against the rungs echoing upwards. I followed, my breath catching shallowly in my chest. The ladder seemed infinite, a Jacob's ladder plunging into industrial Hades. Our lights snagged on spectral cobwebs thick as shrouds and weeping patches of oxidation. The air tasted of stale metal and decay. Perhaps 40 feet from the silo's floor, halfway into the vertical gloom, Jax's beam snagged on violence etched into the wall. "Leo, hold fast," he commanded. "Witness this." I angled my light. 3 profound gouges scored the steel plate, slicing vertically through layers of grime. They looked raw, indecently fresh. The bared metal beneath gleamed with a wet steel shine. "Claw marks," Jax breathed, the words hushed with awe and something colder. My fingertips traced the wounds. Each furrow plunged nearly an inch deep, spanning 3 inches across. Their edges felt lethally sharp. What rips through solid steel like this? Jax shook his head, a silhouette against the deeper dark. Nothing I fancy shaking hands with. Yet upward he climbed. The whispers intensified with our altitude, a mobile susurrus now, seeming to circle above us, punctuated by scraping sounds and heavy, muffled impacts. Sweat slicked my palms despite the chill. Every few feet, more scars marred the silo's inner skin, solitary gashes, clustered sets of 3 or 4, all disturbingly new. 60 feet aloft, we reached a maintenance catwalk, a precarious ring of grated metal hugging the silo's circumference. Our lights swept across further devastation. Sections of the grating were warped, buckled, torn. Deep scratches crisscrossed the entire platform. The architect of this ruin was powerful, immense. "Look." Jax's light fixed on the wall again. More claw marks ascended towards a heavy access hatch set into the silo's side. It hung agape, its thick steel door wrenched hideously on its hinges. A cold draft moaned through the opening. The whispers were sharply defined now, seeming to issue from both the hatch and the unseen reaches above. The words remained elusive, but their cadence held a frantic, desperate quality that raised the hairs on my neck. "Got to see what's making that racket," Jax stated, already moving towards the breached portal. My hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "Are you insane? Whatever tore that door off made those marks. We need to bail, Jax. Now." He twisted free. "Leo, we're this close. Don't you feel it? The need to know?" Classic Jax, always the horizon chaser, compelled towards the unknown lurking beyond the next bend. Usually, I found his relentless curiosity infectious. Tonight, it felt like a fatal flaw. A deafening metallic shriek resonated from above, succeeded by a chain of ponderous thuds that vibrated through the platform beneath our feet. The whispers surged to a frantic crescendo, then sliced into sudden silence. Jax was already scrambling through the mangled hatchway. "Sounds like it's in the upper chamber. We can scope it from here." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I propelled myself after him. The hatch opened onto a cramped service tunnel curving along the silo's outer shell. Our lights revealed a path of utter destruction. Walls bulged outwards, as if pummeled from within. Floor plates were peeled back like tin can lids. Ubiquitous claw marks scored every surface. The tunnel terminated at another hatchway, this one accessing what must have been the primary grain storage chamber. The door wasn't just open, it was gone, ripped clean from its moorings. Frigid air poured through the void. Jax crouched at the threshold, playing his light into the immense space. I knelt beside him, a tremor running through my entire frame. The chamber yawned before us, easily 50 feet across, soaring 30 feet high. Our beams danced across spectral remnants of conveyor belts and grain chutes dangling like metallic entrails from the vaulted ceiling. The far wall was dominated by a colossal loading door, engineered to swing outwards for grain trucks. It stood open now, framing a slice of pale, indifferent moonlight. Movement stirred in the high shadows. Something vast. I registered distinct clicking sounds, sharp, like immense talons finding purchase on metal. The whispers recommenced, seemingly dimensionless, emanating from the very air around us. There! Jax's hiss was sharp, his light spearing upwards. The beam pinned it, a shape that clamped the blood in my veins, a silhouette clinging impossibly to the vertical steel. Pelt like polished obsidian, limbs suggesting immense power coiled, a whip-thin tail twitching. Bear-sized, perhaps, but possessed of a feline predator's lethal grace. Even as we stared, it flowed sideways, melting into the thicker shadows with a speed that fractured logic. More motion flickered at the edge of my vision. Two other forms, smaller but kin to the first, traversed the ceiling like grotesque spiders. Their eyes, multiple and clustered, flashed back our light like banks of cold mirrors. "Mother of God," I whispered. These entities defied any terrestrial taxonomy. Their bodies seemed protean, fluid, shifting in ways that mocked physical law. Louder now, the susurrus resolved, chillingly, into coherence. "Hungry, so hungry. Feed us." Jax gripped my arm. "We have to." A screech, ear-splitting and savage, tore through the air, cutting him off. One of the creatures detached from the ceiling, dropping to the floor maybe 20 feet away with unnerving silence. In the combined glare of our lights, I saw it clearly for the first time. It stood quadrupedal, each limb terminating in wickedly curved, oversized claws. Its form was draped in sleek, light-devouring black fur. The head was vaguely cat-like, but fundamentally wrong, too sharply angled, studded with multiple clusters of unblinking eyes. Its maw gaped, revealing rows upon rows of needle-fine teeth. But the deepest wrongness lay in its motion, an unsettling liquidity, its very outline seeming to ripple and reconfigure moment by moment. As I watched, horrified, a fifth limb extruded itself from its shoulder, then retracted seamlessly back into the flowing mass. "Back," I breathed, the command barely audible. Slowly. We began inching back into the tunnel. The creature observed us, its manifold eyes gleaming. The whispers had become a unified chant. "Stay. Feed us. Stay." Two more shapes plummeted from above, landing silently, blocking our retreat down the tunnel. Smaller iterations of the first, yet equally aberrant, their bodies undulating, flowing towards us. Jax fumbled frantically at his pack, producing a chemical flare. The creatures paused, their myriad eyes fixated on the crimson cylinder. "Ready?" he asked, voice tight. I nodded, clueless as to his intent. He struck the flare. A blinding nova of crimson erupted, painting the tunnel in arterial light. The things recoiled, a collective hiss tearing the air. Their shapes seemed to fray at the edges, their substance blurring, accelerating their chaotic flux. "Light!" Jax yelled, voice raw. "They hate the light. Move!" We bolted back down the ravaged tunnel, Jax brandishing the spitting flare like a talisman behind us. I heard piercing shrieks and the scrape of claws on metal, but dared not look back. We reached the outer hatch, tumbling through it onto the maintenance platform. It swarmed with them now, at least half a dozen, crawling across the walls and ceiling. Yet they maintained a perimeter, hesitant to breach the flare's incandescent circle. "The ladder," I choked out. "Go!" We descended in a controlled fall, half climbing, half sliding down the rungs. The creatures pursued, flowing like animate shadows, staying just beyond the reach of the red glare. The whispers had shifted tone, becoming enraged, venomous. "No escape. Must feed. Stay with us." Halfway down, the flare began to gutter, its brilliant life fading. Sensing its imminent demise, the creatures pressed closer. I caught their scent then, a peculiar metallic tang laced with something sharp, like ozone after a lightning strike. "Almost there," Jax gasped. "Keep moving." The flare died, plunging us into near darkness just as our boots struck the concrete floor. Instantaneously, the creature surged down the walls like an avalanche of living tar. We sprinted for the silo's main entrance, our headlamp beams jouncing crazily. Behind us, the sickening thud of bodies hitting the floor, the scrabble of claws on concrete. We burst from the oppressive dark into the cool relief of the night air. Risking a backward glance as we ran, I saw them clustered at the threshold, their forms boiling with frustrated energy. They couldn't, or perhaps wouldn't, cross into the open. We didn't cease running until we collapsed into Jax's pickup, parked a quarter-mile distant. He slammed the truck into gear, tires spitting gravel as we fishtailed onto the road. Silence hung heavy between us for several minutes, broken only by our ragged breathing. Finally, Jax spoke, his voice hoarse. "What in God's name were those things, Leo?" I shook my head, struggling to regain control of my breath. "I don't know, but they're contained in there. We have to ensure they stay that way." My thought exactly. Anonymous tip to the cops. Suspicious activity. Get that place welded shut. I nodded, my hands still trembling uncontrollably. Think anyone would take our word for it if we told them the truth? Not a chance, but we know, and we make damn sure nobody else finds out the hard way. We drove on through the sleeping countryside. The adrenaline ebb left me utterly drained, yet I knew sleep would be a distant shore tonight, perhaps for many nights. "Hey," Jack said abruptly, breaking the silence again. "The strangest thing, Leo?" "What?" Those whispers, almost recognizable, like echoes of people. People stretched thin, twisted into that. A profound chill traced its way down my spine. I hadn't allowed myself to dwell on that particular horror, on the potential origins of the things we'd witnessed, what they might have been before their monstrous transfiguration. From a desolate gas station payphone, we placed the anonymous call. Strange noises, erratic lights sighted at the abandoned silo, requesting a patrol check. A week later, a cautious drive-by confirmed our hopes. The entrance was sealed with heavy welds, plastered with stark, no trespassing warnings. Sometimes, in the dead hours of the night, the whispers echo in my dreams. I see those fluid, shadow-kin bodies flowing through the crushing dark, and I wonder about their true nature and what terrors might be unleashed should they ever find a way out. Jax and I still seek out the forgotten places, the ruins on the edges of the map, but a new caution tempers our explorations now. We scan the walls for fresh scars, listen intently for the faintest murmur on the wind, and we never, ever venture forth without an abundance of flares. That particular day remains etched in my memory, a flawed jewel from a string of otherwise unremarkable afternoons, because its threads began unraveling the moment I stepped away from my desk. The clock mocked me. I'd lingered too long at work, and a fierce impatience gnawed at me, demanding the solace of home immediately, without pause or detour. My car, usually a reliable shell, felt like a cage as I merged into the sluggish artery of evening traffic. Each pulse of the brake lights ahead tightened the knot in my chest. Then, a flicker of temptation, an unpaved track peeling off the main thoroughfare, vanishing into the dense embrace of the woods. A local legend, perhaps, a path whispered to shave minutes off the commute. Untested by me, unknown, yet irresistible in my haste. "Silas, you fool," a voice might have warned, but I didn't listen. The turnoff swallowed my sedan whole. Smooth tarmac surrendered abruptly to rutted earth, and the trees, sparse at first, rapidly knitted themselves into an imposing emerald canopy. Daylight, already waning, became a strained, bruised purple filtering through the leaves. A tremor of unease ran through me, a primitive caution ignored. I pressed onward. Mere moments later, the car began its lament. The dashboard lights flickered like dying fireflies. The engine coughed, a ragged, metallic gasp. My foot, coaxing the accelerator, was met first with a violent lurch, then a sickening deceleration. Another desperate press, a choked wheeze from beneath the hood, and then silence. Absolute stillness. The engine was dead. The key turned in the ignition, a useless gesture met with stark quiet. Again, nothing. A third time yielded only a pathetic click, the final protest of exhausted mechanics. A ragged sigh escaped me. Through the windshield, a world transformed. Dense thickets, skeletal branches clawing at the twilight, no glimmer of civilization, no companionable headlights, nothing but deepening gloom. The forest held its breath. My phone, predictably, displayed only mocking emptiness. No bars, no signal. I waved it futilely in the air, a modern man's impotent ritual before admitting defeat. Hood propped open, I peered into the engine's cryptic heart. My mechanical knowledge is less than rudimentary, a collection of vague notions about batteries and belts. The acrid scent of hot metal stung my nostrils. I prodded a few cables, searching for some obvious flaw, some simple disconnection my untrained eye could spot. Tools? None. Understanding? Even less. Everything looked superficially intact, yet profoundly broken. Defeated, I slammed the hood shut and leaned against the cooling metal flank of the car, listening. Only the faintest sibilance of wind whispering through the highest boughs broke the profound quiet. Beneath it, the frantic tattoo of my own heart grew louder. Think, Silas. Logic dictated walking back, retracing the path to the main road. But how far had I plunged into this labyrinth? Darkness was falling swiftly now, rendering the woods a wall of inscrutable shadows. The dirt track ahead dissolved into blackness. The prospect of navigating that on foot, alone, sent a fresh wave of anxiety cresting within me. Retreating into the car's flimsy haven, I thumbed the locks down, windows sealed tight. The brief, sterile glare of the interior dome light felt intrusive. Conserving the battery seemed paramount. I switched it off, plunging myself into near-total darkness, adrift in a silent, waiting world. One last, desperate turn of the key confirmed the inevitable. Utterly useless. The silence wasn't empty. It pressed inward, amplifying every tiny sound. The groan of a distant branch settling, the dry rustle of unseen leaves underfoot, the too loud rhythm of my own respiration. My pulse hammered against my ribs. "Stay calm," I commanded myself. It's just a breakdown. Miles from anywhere, true, but nobody's out here. A night spent cramped and uncomfortable, perhaps. Then daylight would bring options. A walk back, a signal found on higher ground. Then a peripheral flicker. Movement, indistinct at the edge of vision. My gaze snapped forward, scanning the tree line through the dusty windshield. With the headlights extinguished, the world outside was a tapestry of deep grays and blacks. My eyes strained, slowly adjusting. There, between two thick boles, a silhouette, indisputably upright, vaguely human. I held my breath, focusing. Something was there. Instinctively, I flicked the headlights on, just for a second. The twin beams sliced through the gloom, illuminating the space maybe 20 feet ahead. Behind the broad trunk of an ancient oak stood a form. Humanoid, yes, but wrong. I registered a shape, limbs, a torso, but where a face should be, there was nothing. A smooth, featureless ovoid. The instant the light hit it, its head, that blank oval, snapped sharply to the side as if startled by the glare. Heart hammering, I killed the lights, praying it was a trick of shadow and fear. A cold dampness bloomed on my forehead. My chest felt constricted, breath catching in my throat. I remained utterly still, listening, waiting, silence. Gathering courage I didn't feel, I stabbed the headlight switch again. It was still there, but now it stood before the tree trunk, squarely facing the car. I desperately tried to discern features, eyes, a mouth, anything. There was only that smooth, pale blankness. It wore drab, dark clothes, unremarkable save for their utter lack of definition. Its posture was unnervingly still. It made no move to advance nor retreat. Off went the lights again, plunging me back into suffocating darkness. My hands trembled uncontrollably. What was this? My phone remained a dead weight. No signal. Rationality clawed for purchase. A mask? Some disturbed individual haunting these woods? It had to be human, didn't it? An elaborate, cruel prank? But the stillness, the utter lack of discernible features. What kind of person stands sentinel in the deep woods, faceless, unmoving? The explanation felt thin, brittle. Staying put seemed the lesser of two evils. The locked doors and rolled-up windows offered a fragile barrier. If it approached, if it tried anything, the horn might startle it, might buy me time. I had to know if it was still there. Headlights on. It had moved. Closer now, standing squarely in the middle of the dirt track, perhaps 10 feet away, oriented towards the car. Still no face, still no gesture, no threat, just presence. The outline of its shoulders was visible, humanoid but terrifyingly alien in its blankness. Lights off. A choked curse escaped my lips. Blood pounded in my ears. This couldn't be real. Escape routes flickered through my panicked mind. Plunging into the tangled, lightless forest seemed suicidal, especially with this sentinel nearby. The car, my metal prison, felt increasingly vulnerable, yet it was all I had. I waited, straining my ears. A soft, crunching sound reached me, leaves underfoot. Stealthy, deliberate steps seemed to circle the vehicle. I double-checked the locks, the handles. Peering through the side windows revealed nothing but impenetrable darkness. Pressing my ear against the cool glass of the driver's side door, I held my breath. The soft crunching ceased. Had it gone? Headlights on again, sweeping the area where I'd first seen it. Empty. I angled the steering wheel slightly, casting the beams towards the left verge. There, partially concealed behind a cluster of low bushes, it stood, watching. Lights off. A tremor ran through me, violent and uncontrollable. Sweat slicked my palms. My pulse throbbed visibly in my neck. I fought to regulate my breathing, sucking in shallow, inadequate gasps, staring blindly into the darkness where I knew it waited. Hours bled together in a terrifying cycle. Darkness, fear, flickering headlights revealing the silent, faceless watcher, always there, sometimes slightly shifted, behind a tree, near the bushes, never approaching the car directly, never touching it, but always present, always observing. Midnight chimed silently on my phone's screen. The engine remained stubbornly dead. Each flick of the headlights seemed weaker, the beams dimmer. I began to conserve them, rationing the light, turning them on only when the sheer terror of not knowing became unbearable. And each time, confirmation. It was still out there. A hollow ache started in my stomach. No food, just a half-empty bottle of water discovered in the glove compartment, sipped sparingly, doing little to ease my parched throat. Think, Silas, think. Could I make a run for it down the track? How fast could it move? Could it follow? My fitness level was laughable. A weapon? The tire iron lay uselessly in the trunk, requiring an excursion into the monitored darkness I couldn't face. My fingers closed around the small LED flashlight in the center console. I switched it on. Its beam was feeble, but better than the oppressive black. A quick scan of the car's interior with the dome light yielded nothing useful. My work satchel full of papers, a crumpled jacket on the passenger seat, a forgotten umbrella, crumbs from some long-eaten snack. Light off. Silence descended again, thick and heavy. My neck muscles screamed from the tension. I tried to stretch, rotating my head, but the cracking sound of vertebrae seemed thunderous in the stillness. I froze, listening intently. A definite rustle, close by, perhaps 10 feet from the passenger side. Without the headlights, visibility was nil. The small flashlight beam barely penetrated the gloom beyond the glass. Desperation sparked an idea. I tapped the horn, a short, sharp bleat that died quickly in the vast woods. Silence. I waited, heart pounding. Then a longer press. The sound echoed, strangely thin. This time, a reaction. Hurried footsteps, the distinct sound of leaves and twigs crunching rapidly, retreating deeper into the trees. Relief washed over me, potent but fleeting. Had I scared it off? Truly. Minutes crawled by. Another tentative honk. No response, no sound of returning steps. My breathing steadied slightly. I wiped the sweat from my brow, shivering despite the car's stuffy air. After perhaps 15 minutes of tense silence, I risked the flashlight again, sweeping its weak beam across the tree line. Nothing. I panned slowly, meticulously examining the shadows. Still nothing. A fragile seed of hope took root. Maybe it was gone for good. The thought of getting out, trying the engine again, even attempting to push the car, flickered and died. The risk remained too great. Flashlight off. Darkness reclaimed the interior. I closed my eyes, just for a second, but every creak of the cooling engine, every sigh of the wind snapped them open again. Time distorted, stretched thin. My phone showed 2:00 a.m., still no signal. A test text message failed instantly. Panic simmered just below the surface. Just hold on until morning. Daylight felt like a mythical promise. With the sun, surely safety would return. I could see, I could navigate, I could escape this waking nightmare. A sharp crack nearby, a branch snapping under weight. My hand spasmed, grabbing the flashlight, aiming it toward the passenger side window. It was back, closer than ever, standing just beside the bushes lining the track, its form starkly visible in the frail beam. Head utterly blank, torso long, still arms, motionless. The flashlight trembled in my grip, but I saw it clearly now. Its smooth head tilted slightly, an inquisitive, utterly alien gesture. My heart felt like it would burst. My voice was a dry rasp in my throat. What? What do you want? I whispered, the sound swallowed by the night. No answer came. I clicked the flashlight off, unable to bear the sight any longer. My forehead rested against the cool plastic of the steering wheel. Breathe slowly, Silas. The air inside the car was stale, thick with my own fear sweat. I longed to be anywhere else. Checked the locks again. Secure. Then, a soft, dragging sound from the front of the car, like coarse fabric or a worn shoe scraping lightly against the dirt road. I lifted my head, peering through the windshield into near-total blackness, seeing only the faintest outlines of trees against a starless sky. Trapped. A scream built in my chest, but I choked it down. Another tap on a horn, a lonely, desperate sound. Silence. Then, after several agonizing minutes, a soft thump directly on the roof. A single, distinct impact. My entire body went rigid. I pointed the flashlight uselessly upwards. Nothing to see from inside. I sat frozen, listening, every nerve ending alight. Silence returned. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but a sliver of reason insisted the car remain the safest place. The waiting resumed. Time ceased to have meaning, marked only by the frantic rhythm of my heart and the slow creep of the numbers on my phone. Nearly 4 a.m. The forest remained profoundly dark, but somewhere beyond the trees, the faintest promise of dawn stirred. Just hold on. For a long while, there were no more sounds. Had it left again? Exhaustion warred with terror. My eyelids drooped, heavy as lead, only for adrenaline to jolt me awake at the slightest imagined noise. Around 5 a.m., the quality of the darkness shifted. A subtle dilution, the black softening to deepest indigo. Tree shapes gained definition. The hood of the car emerged from the gloom. The side mirror reflected a pale, pre-dawn sky. Cautiously, I scanned the perimeter. No sign of the figure. No sound but the distant, tentative chirping of the first waking birds. the oppressive silence began to feel less menacing, touched by the approaching light. As the eastern sky bled gray, then pink, I made my decision. Turning, the lock felt deafeningly loud. I eased the door open and slid out, flashlight clutched like a weapon, the tire iron retrieved moments later from the trunk feeling heavy and reassuring in my other hand. My legs were stiff, my back a column of pain. I scanned the woods in every direction. Empty. The damp earth showed only my own frantic tracks around the car. No other sign. The birdsong grew bolder. Under the hood, the engine remained an unsolvable puzzle. Closing it with a soft click, I turned my back on the dead vehicle and began to walk, following the dirt track the way I'd come. Each step was tentative at first, my head constantly swiveling, checking behind me. The forest floor, damp and yielding, muffled my progress. There was no sign it had ever been there. An hour passed, the sun climbing definitively above the trees, dappling the path in gold. Then, salvation, the familiar glint of asphalt, the main road. I stumbled onto it, gasping for breath, relief flooding through me, sharp and dizzying. My phone remained useless, but the paved road was a lifeline. Following it would lead somewhere eventually. I walked, putting distance between myself and the shadowed woods, glancing back repeatedly at the silent tree line. Nothing watched me now. What was it? I'll never know. Humanoid, yet utterly inhuman. Silent, observant, faceless. Its motives remain a terrifying blank. That shortcut, that descent into the woods, is a path Silas will never tread again. The frustration of traffic jams suddenly seems a small price to pay. Far better than another night trapped in the suffocating dark, with that impossible thing standing sentinel just beyond the fragile glass, watching, waiting, its smooth, featureless face a perfect mirror of the abyss. Even now, safe on a known road, bathed in morning light, the memory tightens its cold grip around my stomach. I just kept walking, focusing on the reassuring rhythm of my own footsteps, profoundly grateful for the daylight and the growing miles between me and the silent watcher in the woods. The first tremor of dissonance arrived on a Tuesday evening. Home from the archives, weary, I remember the weight of my leather satchel hitting the floor beside the armchair, a familiar thud in the quiet apartment, a journey to the kitchen for water, a brief respite. Returning, my gaze snagged on the earthenware cup beside the lamp, nudged perhaps 3 inches eastward from where I'd set it the night prior, a precise placement near the table's sharp geometry. Utterly illogical. Solitude cultivates peculiar habits, an internal map of belongings. I abhor deviations. A trick of fatigue, I reasoned, a phantom nudge from my own passing coat. I let it dissolve. The unease failed to vanish entirely, resurfacing the following morning. Pressed for time, a lecture looming, my exit was arrested by the sight of a hefty monograph on medieval cartography, canted awkwardly on its shelf. My books stand sentinel, spines aligned, flush with the polished wood. This volume, however, leaned askew by a clear inch, a blatant disruption. A knot tightened low in my gut, irrational yet insistent. Time bled away as I stared. Then, abandoning the impulse to correct it, I fled the apartment, disquiet, clinging like static. Over the subsequent days, the anomalies multiplied, small fissures in the bedrock of my routine. A landscape print hung infinitesimally tilted. A velvet cushion migrated from its usual corner on the sofa. A slate coaster vanished from the coffee table, only to reappear later beneath it, propped at an unnatural angle against a leg. I began nocturnal patrols of my own domain, reconstructing my movements, questioning my own hand in these minute rearrangements. Had I carried the monograph to the armchair, dropped the coaster inadvertently? No memory surfaced. Each discovery sent a faint, electric jolt through my chest. My vocation demands scrutiny of human patterns, of memory's fragile architecture, yet the subtle chaos in my own meticulously ordered space confounded me. Action became imperative. I devised a system, rigorous and empirical. Each night, before sleep claimed me, I traversed the apartment, phone held aloft like a surveyor's tool. Photographs, capturing the precise coordinates of every object on every surface, the exact angle of every frame upon the walls. The inaugural session stretched past an hour, a ritual bordering on the obsessive, yet I craved tangible proof. As a historian, I understood the mind's capacity for self-deception, especially when besieged by stress. I needed an unblemished record. Morning arrived with a heightened sense of alertness, my pulse a nervous drum against my ribs. Phone in hand, I began the comparative analysis. Bedroom first. The bedside lamp stood firm, the clock angled correctly towards the pillow. Relief, fleeting. Then, the living area. My favored earthenware cup, photographed the previous night, perched on the kitchen counter's edge, handle aimed towards the stove, now resided within the stainless steel basin of the sink. Empty, save for a few pearlescent drops of water clinging to its interior. A chill traced my spine. I scrolled frantically through the image gallery. There it was. Counter, handle towards stove. Undeniable. No recollection of moving it. I scrutinized the timestamp, the surrounding frames. Nothing accounted for its relocation. A lump formed in my throat, thick and obstructive. I lived alone. No one possessed a duplicate key. No visitors had crossed the threshold. The deadbolt was religiously thrown each night, as it was this morning. A profound weight settled in my stomach as I left for the university. Attempting to lecture on historical causation and the fallibility of eyewitness accounts felt hypocritical, my own narrative fracturing internally. The question echoed, who moved the cup? That evening, I returned with grim determination, unlocking the door and sweeping my gaze across the entryway. Nothing amiss. I stepped into the living room, eyes darting, cataloging. All seemed placid, ordered. I consulted the previous night's photographs, cross-referencing object placements. Everything appeared stable, conforming to the digital record. Yet, the unsettling sensation persisted, a prickling awareness, as if unseen eyes observed me from the periphery. I spun around twice, finding only empty air and familiar shadows. "Calm yourself, Elias," I inwardly commanded. A deep breath, water. The nightly photographic ritual repeated, a necessary anchor in increasingly uncertain waters. Days bled into weeks. Minor shifts still seemed to occur, subtle adjustments to the apartment's inanimate populace. But then, a more insidious pattern began to emerge, far more disturbing than misplaced objects. Reviewing older photographs, comparing them against my memory of those specific evenings, a horrifying discrepancy yawned open. I'd look at an image, a fountain pen angled across my desk blotter, and a visceral certainty would rise. No, it lay parallel to the inkwell that night. But the photograph, stark and objective, refuted my internal conviction. The objects weren't migrating. My remembrance of their arrangement was fracturing, subtly rewriting itself after the fact. The discovery landed like a physical blow. I sat late one night on the sofa, the glow of the phone illuminating my face as I flipped through image after image, seeking disparities between consecutive days. Often, none existed. The monograph remained flush, the coaster stayed put. Yet my memory insisted otherwise, whispering tales of displacement contradicted by the very evidence I had gathered. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My hands trembled. A wave of nausea washed over me. Am I losing my mind? Is this the onset of some cognitive decay? The thought was a viper I desperately tried to avoid, yet no other explanation readily presented itself. My world contracted, social invitations went unanswered, optional faculty meetings skipped. I became hypervigilant, documenting my own actions. Shifting an armchair necessitated a photograph. Opening a drawer prompted a mental inventory of its contents. My phone swelled with mundane images, a testament to my escalating paranoia. Was it merely stress? The crushing weight of academic pressure? Perhaps. But the feeling of otherness, of something fundamentally awry, refused to dissipate. Sleep became a battleground, punctuated by abrupt awakenings, skin slick with sweat, heart racing. Faint susurration seemed to emanate from the hallway, phantom clicks from the living room. Each time I'd rise, phone clutched like a weapon, only to find silence and stillness, the unease a palpable presence in the air. My historian's mind flirted with external forces, with narratives beyond the rational, but the evidence offered no purchase. It pointed instead inwards, towards a terrible possibility. My own memories were becoming unreliable ephemera. A fleeting childhood recollection surfaced one afternoon, strangely vivid, only to dissolve into mist by evening, the memory of the memory itself fraying. Concerns about repressed events, psychological schisms I'd only studied academically, now felt terrifyingly personal. The ground beneath my feet felt unstable, my own past a shifting landscape. I decided to impose order on the chaos, migrating all notes and photographs to my laptop, creating meticulously dated folders. I sought correlations, triggers linked to stress, sleep deprivation, even diet, but found none. Yet, sifting through the digital archive, a timeline did emerge. The objects involved in these perceived shifts, the ones my memory kept rearranging, were predominantly personal artifacts, vestiges of my life before professorship. A worn anthology from my undergraduate years. A silver picture frame acquired in my early 20s. The earthenware cup used throughout graduate school. Each instance of mental dissonance centered on these relics of a younger self. Compelled, I delved deeper. What did these items signify? Memories from my late teens and early 20s flickered. A specific summer remained stubbornly elusive, shrouded in a dense fog. Thinking about it induced a dull ache behind my eyes, a pressure in my chest. Flashes assailed me. Peeling paint in a cheap apartment, the sour tang of cigarettes I never smoked. Then, abruptly, the connection would sever. One evening, examining an old photograph, Myself, grinning awkwardly between two friends at a campus gathering, my hand began to shake. I recognized the face, but the moment felt hollow, the photographer nameless. The date stamp confirmed it. That obscured summer. A jolt of primal fear shot through me, my breath catching in my throat. I had to put the photo down. The lapses intensified, forgetting where I'd placed my phone, my wallet, only to find them in plain sight, on the desk beside the door, with absolutely no recollection of putting them there. Each occurrence triggered a fresh surge of panic, a cold sweat beating on my brow. It wasn't just object permanence anymore. It was the continuity of my own actions dissolving. One evening found me seated at my desk, staring at the mocking blink of the cursor on a blank document. My intention, to chronicle everything I could recall about that lost summer, hoping the act of writing might dislodge the blockage. 2 sentences materialized before a sharp headache bloomed behind my temples. My jaw clenched. A phone notification buzzed, ignored. I forced out a few more words. My vision swam. Sweat slicked my palms. My mind actively resisted excavation. Days blurred. Lectures delivered on autopilot. The tension in the apartment became a physical presence. Sleep offered little refuge. The obsessive checking continued. Sometimes, the conviction that the room itself was subtly altering its dimensions felt utterly real, until the cold comparison with photographs proved it was my perception, my grasp on reality, that was warping. One night, a distinct sound, a sharp, metallic click, emanated from the bedroom closet. I sprang from bed, heart pounding, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Empty. Hangers undisturbed. Nothing. I stood there, breathing raggedly, scanning every inch. Dizziness washed over me. The sound had been undeniable, yet no source existed. I stumbled back to bed, staring at the ceiling until the first gray light of dawn. The thought of professional help surfaced more insistently. A colleague specialized in memory disorders. But the shame, the humiliation of admitting this internal unraveling, held me back. I stalled, clinging to the illusion of control. One final strategy: audio journaling. Phone propped on the living room table, I began recording my voice late each evening, narrating my day, meticulously detailing object placements before the nightly photo session. The earthenware cup is now in the sink, rinsed, I heard myself say, my voice strained with fatigue. Then, bed, the familiar headache pulsing as I fought intrusive thoughts. The next morning, playback. My own voice, tired but clear, listed the object's locations. I compared the audio to the photographs. Perfect correspondence. The cup was indeed in the sink. Yet, my immediate, visceral memory screamed that I had left it on the table beside the lamp. My chest tightened. Literal, audible proof of my own actions, directly contradicting the narrative supplied by my mind. My focus narrowed again, zeroing in on that mnemonic blind spot, that lost summer. I spread the old photographs across the coffee table, arranging them chronologically. Staring at certain images provoked a physical reaction. Chest heavy, hands trembling, breath quickening. Images flooded my consciousness. That dilapidated apartment building, peeling paint stark under a single bare bulb, the lingering smell of smoke in the hallway. An argument, loud, venomous, my voice, and another's, sharp with pain. My heart hammered. Then, blackness. The memory fractured, incomplete. A nascent understanding began to dawn. My present disorientation was inextricably linked to that unaddressed fragment of my past. Buried, blocked, denied. Now, my own psyche, through this bizarre, unsettling mechanism, was forcing it towards the light. It wasn't an external haunting, nor incipient dementia. It was my brain, attempting to integrate a painful, dissociated experience, disrupting my sense of the present to command attention. So, I surrendered. All distractions silenced. Lights dimmed, curtains drawn, only a single lamp illuminating the room. I sat on the sofa, forcing myself to confront each photograph from that summer, pushing through the stabs of pain in my head. Slowly, painfully, fragments returned. A profound personal crisis, a devastating betrayal by someone implicitly trusted, a week lost to insomnia and near starvation, the desperate feeling of flight, leaving that apartment abruptly, carrying only a single suitcase, abandoning possessions, abandoning a part of myself. As these shards of memory surfaced, relief warred with terror. My heart pounded, my mouth was desert dry, yet a measure of clarity returned. I had never processed that trauma. I had walled it off. These insidious memory shifts, this cognitive dissonance, it was the desperate maneuvering of my own mind to force reconciliation. In that moment, the suffocating fear of insanity receded. My body still thrummed with adrenaline, but a small, quiet center of calm asserted itself. I remained there for a long while, the old photographs spread before me like tarot cards revealing a forgotten fate. Breathing slowly, deliberately, I allowed the memories to settle, not fighting them. I resolved then to contact a therapist, a trusted friend, to begin untangling this knot. The memory lapses might not cease immediately. More fragments might surface unexpectedly. But the paralyzing fear had lessened. I understood the source lay within, not without. Closing the laptop, I gathered the photos into a neat pile. Standing, a dull ache resonated in my lower back from the prolonged tension. My gaze swept the living room, steady, solid. The furniture held its position. The cup remained precisely where I'd last placed it. My phone rested where I remembered leaving it. My world, for the first time in weeks, felt anchored, even as I acknowledged the internal landscape required careful navigation and healing. The documentation would continue, perhaps for a while, but the panic had ebbed, replaced by a weary understanding. My mind wasn't betraying me, it was signaling a need. That thought offered a sliver of reassurance. I walked towards the bedroom, switched off the light, and slipped beneath the covers. My heart still beat faster than normal, but the frantic edge was gone. I felt grounded, poised on the brink of a difficult, necessary journey. Closing my eyes, I drifted towards sleep, finally ready to face it. The sign, a skeletal relic hemorrhaging neon onto the rain-slicked asphalt, sputtered promises of vacancy and cathode ray comforts. But as Elias wrestled his weary sedan onto the crunching gravel expanse, his mind conjured only visions of scalding water and the yielding oblivion of a pillow. He couldn't fathom, then, that surrendering to this roadside phantom would initiate the longest, most predatory night of his existence. He'd been swallowing miles for an eternity, it felt, the highway's hypnotic stripes searing his retinas. Sewell had plunged hours ago, surrendering the world to a ballet of Pearson headlights and amorphous gloom. The motel emerged from this void not as an oasis, but a dilapidated siren call in the sprawling desert of night. Peeling paint like sunburnt skin, a marquee choked with dead bulbs. None of it mattered. It offered cessation, a pause, and that was currency enough. Inside the cramped office, the air hung thick, a miasma of ghosts of cigarettes past and the cloying sweetness of pine disinfectant. Behind a scarred Formica counter presided Beatrice, her face a fascinating cartography of wrinkles, yet overlaid with a smile of determined pleasantness. She presented the key to room 12, the brass tag cool against his palm, murmuring wishes for a tranquil night. Elias offered a curt nod of thanks, his exhaustion a wall too high for pleasantries. Room 12 was compact, possessing a certain sterile impersonality that passed for clean. His duffel landed on the questionable floral bedspread with a soft thud before he made straight for the bathroom. The shower head sighed a pathetic stream, the water achieving a tepid neutrality that was somehow still exquisite against his road-grimed skin. Toweling off, his gaze snagged on a brittle pamphlet perched on the nightstand, a flimsy chronicle of the motel's supposed heyday in the 1950s. Faded Kodachrome families beamed from its pages, frozen moments of transient joy. He idly scanned the text, a paragraph snagging his attention. Local whispers, tales of guests who'd checked in decades ago and dissolved into the region's folklore, dismissed with a casual wave. A dry chuckle escaped him. These ancient husks always collected ghost stories like dust. He burrowed into the thin sheets, the television spitting static-laced images across the room before darkness finally claimed him. Sleep was a shallow pool, however, and around the witching hour, a subtle disturbance pricked his consciousness. Footfalls, perhaps? Indistinct, hesitant, whispering just beyond his door. Dragging himself upright, Elias squinted through the distorting lens of the peephole. The corridor stretched vacant, bathed in the sickly yellow cast of a low-wattage bulb. Merely another transient soul, he reasoned, retreating to the dubious comfort of the bed. But true rest remained elusive. An indefinable pressure permeated the room, a weight settling on his chest. The air felt watchful. He shifted, restless, the pamphlet's casual mention of the vanished echoing unpleasantly in the hollows of his mind. Just as the edges of sleep began to blur once more, a distinct click sliced through the quiet. His eyes snapped open, darting through the oppressive dark. There, tucked into the shadows near the ceiling, nestled behind the grimy slats of the air vent, pulsed a tiny, malevolent red eye. Ice water sluiced through his veins. A camera. He scrambled from the bed, a frantic energy seizing him. His hands swept the room, patting walls, peering behind the cheap landscape painting. Another one, identical, watching. Who? Why? His fingers fumbled for his phone, the screen a dead, mocking black. No signal. Naturally, stranded leagues from anywhere. Escape wasn't just desirable, it was imperative. He dressed with frantic haste, fabrics whispering loudly in the charged silence, snatching his bag. His hand reached for the doorknob, freezing as the footsteps returned. Closer now, quicker, imbued with undeniable purpose. They halted directly outside. A dreadful, pregnant pause hung in the air, then a soft, almost intimate rap on the wood. "Everything satisfactory in there, darling." Beatrice. Her voice, previously just friendly, now oozed a syrupy, unnatural sweetness. Silence was his only reply. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat he felt sure must be audible through the thin door. "We noticed a light flick back on," she continued, the plural pronoun landing like a stone in his gut. "We? Just ensuring you didn't require anything." He remained statue still, praying for her retreat. Instead, the faint metallic jingle of keys reached him. "Well, I'll just pop in and make sure you're settled comfortably, dear." Panic detonated within him. He wrenched the door inward, the sudden violence catching her off guard. She staggered back, the glint of a passkey stark in her hand. Looming behind her, previously unseen, stood Silas, a monolith of a man, tall and broad, his face impassive as if sculpted from granite. "Oh," Beatrice chirped, recovering with unnerving speed, her smile snapping back into place. "You gave me quite the start. Is everything quite all right?" Elias forced a nod, his voice a strained imitation of calm. "Perfectly fine. Just stepping out for some air." Her smile was glacial, devoid of warmth. "At this hour, it's hardly safe out there, darling. Why not join us in the office? We could brew you some chamomile." Silas hadn't shifted, his gaze pinning Elias like an insect. "We." Clutching his bag like a shield, Elias shook his head. "No, thank you. I believe I'll just take a short drive." He attempted to sidestep them, a desperate feint towards freedom, but Silas moved with surprising speed, planting himself firmly in the path. "I'm afraid," Silas intoned, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the narrow hallway, "we can't permit that." In that instant, the vague unease crystallized into stark terror. Instinct took over. Elias shoved hard, shouldering past Beatrice, past the unmoving bulk of Silas, and sprinted down the jaundiced corridor towards the promise of the exit sign. Their footsteps pounded behind him, echoing, multiplying in the confined space. He slammed through the exit door, gulping the cool, damp night air. The parking lot was a desolate stage, his car the solitary player under the buzzing security light. As he lunged towards it, Beatrice's voice ripped through the night, sharp and chilling. "You can't leave, darling. Nobody ever leaves." His keys felt alien in his trembling hands, refusing to find the lock. Just as the tumblers finally clicked, a heavy hand clamped onto his shoulder, spinning him around. Silas. His stone face was contorted now, etched with fury. "You weren't supposed to see the cameras," he growled. Thought abandoned him. Pure reflex governed. Elias drove his knee upward, a sharp, vicious blow connecting solidly. Silas buckled with a guttural grunt, his grip momentarily slackening. Elias seized the instant, throwing himself into the driver's seat. The engine roared, a defiant scream in the stillness. Tires spat gravel as he tore out of the lot, fishtailing onto the empty highway. In the rearview mirror, a fleeting, nightmarish tableau. Beatrice and Silas standing side by side, watching him vanish into the darkness. He drove until the blacktop grayed with the approaching dawn, his pulse a frantic rhythm against the drone of the engine, eyes constantly flicking to the mirror. Only when the sun bled orange across the horizon did he dare pull into the fluorescent glare of a sprawling truck stop, the noise and movement a fragile shield. He recounted the night's events to the state police, the words tumbling out in a ragged torrent. They listened, took notes, promised inquiries, but their eyes held a patient skepticism. Hidden cameras in a rundown motel, likely some solitary deviant, they suggested gently. But Elias knew. He knew the cloying sweetness in Beatrice's voice, the finality in Silas's stance, the chilling weight of that pronouncement. Nobody ever leaves. It was more than sordid voyeurism. It was a maw, hidden behind peeling paint and vacant smiles. What became of the others, the names whispered in the brittle pamphlet, remained an unanswered question, swallowed by official reports citing insufficient evidence. The motel still stands, he imagines, its sign still flickering its lethal invitation onto the lonely highway. He never found out for sure. He never went back. But now, every time the silhouette of a roadside motel looms in the distance, his grip tightens on the wheel. His foot presses a little harder on the accelerator. Because the night taught him a terrible truth. You never truly know who is watching, waiting patiently behind the door of room 12, ready for the next guest to check in, permanently.